Hi, and welcome back to David Pattinson's Accused Friends. Today I want to talk to you about the complete suspension of civil liberties for British citizens in what is totally outrageous behaviour by the government. I want to say that any suspension of civil liberties for British citizens is completely unacceptable, no exceptions. But to have so many suspended all in one go, I think is just a total outrage beyond anything I've ever seen in my life. I got interested in this with Alison Saunders, who'd suspended the presumption of innocent until proven guilty for British men in sex cases. And of course, once you accept it happened once, it's a pretty slippery slope to all your civil liberties suspended. Obviously, it's done under the guise of a crisis and an unavoidable crisis, but I dispute that strongly, and I want to use this video to explain why. So I've been looking at my Magna Carta, and there's no mention in Magna Carta of anything to do with plagues or viruses or pandemics, and I want to read you some language from Magna Carta that I think is pertinent. And it says, no free man, this is related to British citizens, no free man shall be seized, imprisoned, or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled, or deprived of his standing in any other way. Nor will we proceed with force against him or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. So no mention there of guilt pre-trial. What's been happening in Great Britain is that the entire country is under house arrest with the presumption of guilt, the presumption that British citizens either have the coronavirus and are going to be infecting other people. Yet, why do we not have a situation where the government has to prove that they have the virus and that it is going to infect other people? Why do we allow a situation where it's assumed they do when people might just be perfectly healthy people? What's wrong with a situation where police have to, if they suspect someone has a virus and is a danger to society, they can charge them. That person surely then has the right to legal counsel and to appear before a judge or jury and to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Obviously, with the suspension of the courts, there's not going to be any trials. People can just be presumed guilty or presumed to have a virus and therefore had to be under house arrest permanently or indefinitely. And the police are acting as judge, jury, and executioner in this case. It's totally against the law, in my view. And, there needs to be some consequences for it. There's been a lot of stories in the news that I've been following and related to fines. People are out and about congregating in more than one group of more than two people. They're subject to fines. And it's presuming guilt, again, on British citizens that they've got the virus, they're going to be infecting other people. There's never any thought that the police might have the virus and be infecting British citizens that may cause their death. I note that Prince Charles and Boris Johnson both have the coronavirus, and no one hopes they get better sooner than I do. But if they're infecting British people, are they subject to fines? If they're causing death by walking around their offices or their castles, why are they exempt from fines or from manslaughter charges when British citizens have a different set of criteria applied to them when they may be 100% healthy? Now, I've got no problem with a common sense policy like, what do we call it, self-detention or self-isolation, but surely that has to be at the discretion of the free citizen. If you're an individual, over 70 years old, or you've got underlying health conditions, you can go and self-isolate in your bedroom, and people who are walking around on the streets are not going to be infecting you in any way because they're not coming into contact with you. You're self-isolating, you're in your house. Those people who wish to take the risk that they may get an infection and die, surely that's at their discretion as a free citizen. So I wanted to talk about, a couple of other areas of this unchecked government power. I mean, it's laid out to the British people as being a temporary measure, and people say, David, this is just a temporary measure. But as I know, and as many of the older people in the audience probably know, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. So I've talked about the presumption of guilt pre-trial, or just no trial here, no due process, and I want to talk about some other freedoms that I believe we have. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I know Britain does not have a written constitution. I welcome anyone who's an expert on British rights to comment in the comment section below, or to contact me. And if there's any pertinent information, I'd be happy to relay it to the viewers. But I do believe we have certain rights as free citizens, and we'll just lay some of them out to you. I want to start with freedom of association, which I think all British people would believe that they have, particularly freedom of association to protest against the government. That's conveniently been suspended for now. Also freedom of religion, again, suspended for now. We are able to communicate by digital medium, which is a good thing. But of course, we're only able to communicate through mediums that can be monitored by the government. So any political or religious discussion in the country is subject to spying. And there's been no doubt that the government are interested in spying on the people with the use of drones, or the use of monitoring, tracking mobile phones so you can track people's movements. And again, totally violates the right to privacy. Surely British citizens have a right to privacy, and the government cannot invade that privacy without just cause, without probable cause. And of course, the probable cause they use is that, you must have the coronavirus. But of course, unless they do a medical test on you, unless someone said, hey, look, this person's showing symptoms of illness, what probable cause is there? Again, when you suspend the courts, and you suspend presumption of innocence, you're proven guilty, the right to privacy dies along with it. So I want to also mention there's been also some news articles talking about, you can only purchase things that you absolutely need, but who defines what each individual absolutely needs for health, for personal safety, and for any other thing? Why are free citizens not able to buy what they want to buy, from each other, from the market? Why is that now subject to government scrutiny? Again, against the constitutional rights of British citizens. People have lost the right to work and earn a living. You now have to be dependent on government handouts, which I think is totally outrageous. The right to property, you cannot go to your place of work if you're an owner of that place of work, because you're banned from movement. We've got roadblocks up, and you have to justify to the police every journey you're making, and they decide whether it's in the public interest or your interest to go there. Otherwise, you get turned around and sent back home. So it's obviously a worrying time. We don't know which way the coronavirus is going to go. I feel 100% healthy. I'm prepared for any scenario. I've been looking at the deaths from the virus, the daily deaths, and they've been growing up to a certain point. I mean, I know that Britain on average has about 1,300 deaths per day. There's no evidence from my point of view that we're well above that number, or we're above that number in any way. There's no evidence that I've seen that the coronavirus is the cause of death for people, or whether people are dying of other factors, other health issues, and they just happen to have the coronavirus at the time that they die. There needs to be justification for this clampdown in civil liberties, and I haven't seen it. But even if there was a pandemic that was wiping people out left and right, again, it's still no justification for free citizens of our country to be under house arrest for their own good. It's up to the government to prove the case that people need to be in isolation. We need to assume people are healthy unless they show signs of not being. And I think this story is going to run and run. I've got a lot of ideas that I'm formulating, and I want to talk to you about it. But I do want to remind people this slippery slope of denying people's rights to innocent until proven guilty, and also freedom of speech with police recording, hate speech. And even though there's not any kind of laws in Parliament that ban certain types of speeches, but obviously you start recording hate speech and then you present it to Parliament and they say, oh yeah, well, we need to start banning different types of speech. So I think if we let the people say what they want to say, they'd agree with me. They'd say, we don't want people's constitutional rights being violated. There's absolutely no justification for it in this time, with minimal deaths in the country or any other time. I certainly recommend people, use good judgment and use common sense and, focus on their personal safety. And that's something I say all the time. But what we're doing is we're crashing our economy. We're putting tons of great people into poverty and making them, giving government a far undue proportion of power over us that they haven't earned and we have not willingly given them. They have just seized it from us. So I hope you find this video interesting. Be happy to make more of these during the crisis, and we'll see where we end up. But please, if you like this, subscribe to the channel. Feel free to comment, and we'll look forward to talking with you again soon. Thanks very much.